Okay, good. So welcome everybody to this seminar today. Today we are happy to host Dr. Liang Li, which is a PI at the Max Planck Institute of Animal Behavior and also University of Constance. He received a PhD in mechanics from Peking University and then performed a postdoc at the same Max Planck Institute. His interests include bioinspired robotics, such as collective behavior in animal robot systems and biofluid dynamics in fish schooling, which is the topic of today's talk. Just before leaving the word to Dr. Li for his talk, I would like to remind you that we have a question time session at the end of the talk, which is aimed to last around 45-50 minutes. Also, the talk is going to be recorded, as you can see. If you would like to ask questions, you can write down in the chat or just turn on your microphone at the end of the talk and just ask your question to the speaker. So that being said, Dr. Li, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Giovanni. Thanks for the introduction and thank you all for coming. I'm Liang Li. I'm from Max Planck Institute of Animal Behavior and University of Constance. Today, I would like to talk about schooling fish from biology to robotics and back, which means I will talk to two aspects. One is from biology to robotics, and the other one is from robotics to biology. Well, after 500 million years of evolution, fish already evolved with remarkable swimming abilities under very complex three-dimensional underwater environments. These amazing swim abilities are always inspiring engineers like to build different types of underwater robots. And they have built different prototypes for different purpose, but they have one thing in common. Well, that is bio-inspiration. So what is bio-inspiration? In simple, that is learning concepts from the nature, right? So for example, in nature, we find fish can swim forward by purely body undulation. Then we wonder if we can also build a machine or a robot, which can also swim forward by purely body undulation. Then, well, you can build a robotic fish. So following this concept, we first consider bio-inspired hardware. So we look at nature and we find for fish system, they have two main characteristics of the body. So one thing is it is flexible in the lateral directions. And the second thing is incompressible in the longitudinal direction. So, flexible in the lateral directions allow the fish to, flap left, right, and incompressible, which will result to the thrust always contribute to speed instead of, compressing energy. So we built a robotic fish with 3 servo motors as shown here. So the servo motors are connected in a chain and each motor can freely move left, right, but incompressible in front, back direction. Besides the hardware, which is bio-inspired, we also want to build a software, which is also bio-inspired. And we know in general, animals and also including our human beings are controlled by central pattern generator for the locomotion. What is central pattern generator? In simple, that is a neural network which can receive a high level but low dimensional signal and decode to low level but high dimensional signal. Well, how to understand this is quite complicated, right? But I will give you a very simple example to understand it. Imagine you want to take a bus to go to uni or institute to work. Before you go to the bus station, you find the bus is already there. What will you think in your brain? You probably think run to catch up the bus. You never think about what exactly the frequency my leg should use, what exactly the amplitude my leg should use, or what exactly the phase difference between my 2 legs I should perform the run to catch up the bus, right? So your brain just sent very low dimensional, but it's high level command, run to catch up the bus. And the central pattern generator of our body will decode this, just very low dimensional signal and to high dimensional signal, such as frequency, amplitude, and the phase difference between your legs and so on. Then you can perform run and then finish the task to catch up the bus. So similarly, we also have this central pattern generator for the robotic fish system and with the bio-inspired hardware system too. Before we really test this hardware and software, we first do simulations. We design 4 different swim patterns and put it into a simulation environment and to see how the robotic fish performs. After we pass this simulation, we put the controller to the robotic fish in a tank, and the robotic fish can swim forward, turning with different oscillations, and also with some special patterns, the robotic fish can also swim backward. It's not as efficient as swim forward, but it does. Works very slowly now. Okay, then we want to further challenge our design. We want to compare the locomotion between our robotic fish and the real fish system. And here is a comparison between a real fish and a robotic fish. As you can see here, they perform quite similarly. After that, we go back to nature again. We find in nature, most fish, they swim in groups. Then we wonder, can we also make our robotic fish swim in the group? To do so, we needed to design another pair of hardware and software. So with the hardware, we have a tank, and within the tank, we have one or multiple robotic fish. And above the tank, there's a camera which can streaming the robotic fish swimming. And with the software, we can track the position and direction of the robotic fish. And you can deploy any controller to control one or multiple robots for different tasks. To test this, we give a very simple task for 3 robotic fish to cover a full circle. They needed to cover the circle in a uniform way. To do so, we need a bottom level controller that is making the robotic fish swimming from one pose to another pose. So here pose means the position and also direction. For example, you have a high level controller for 3 robotic fish to match this, this circling behavior, to perform this circling behavior. Then you have a higher level controller, which at each simulation step, you just tell this individual swim to this pose in the next simulation step. And then the bottom level controller will take care of this. And here we applied active disturbance rejection controller for this task, which means ADRC is applied to drive a robotic fish swimming from any pose to another target pose. We choose ADRC because first, it is model-free. As you know, a fish swimming in the flow, the turbulence is very strong and it's very hard to model it. And even you can model it, it's very hard for a microcontroller to process it on board. And second, it can actually estimate noise and then cancel it before you can apply the controller. And this is very, helpful for the robotic fish case. As you can see, when the robots swim by body undulation, it will always generate turbulences, and it's very hard to predict. Again, to test our algorithm and also platform, we first do simulations. So in this case, we first do simulation in the computational fluid dynamics. And with this platform, we can tune the parameters for the ADRC, and also after we tune the parameters in the simulation environment, we put the parameters in the real robot system. And we can see they have similar performance. Because of the robotic fish, they cannot swim backward efficiently. So for some target pose, we need to control a robot to have a U-turn to reach. For example, like this case. And again, we also tune the parameters in the simulation first, and then we put the exact parameter to the robot, and also, of course, exact controller. Well, there's a deviation, but the performance relatively are similar. After that, we tested with 3 robotic fish. They are initialized from random positions and automatically to converge to covering a 4 circle. So in this case, as you can see, the turbulence is very strong based on the light reflection here, but the formation is quite stable. After this, we want to, again, challenging our 3 robotic fish a step further. We want to ask the 3 robotic fish to swim and cover just half circle. And in this case, the 2 robotic fish, or the distance between 2 robotic fish is smaller even, and then the turbulence effect will be stronger. But you can see the 3 robotic fish, they can perform quite well and stable formation behavior or circling behavior. After these experiments, after these 2 projects, I find most of my study are just from biology to biorobotics, which means we learn from nature, and we never think about the other way, which means we already have those bio-inspired robots. They are cool, they are great. Can we also do something for biology system, which means can we use our pre-built robots to understand some biological questions, and those questions are potentially very hard to answer with traditional biological methods. So in the following, I will introduce 2 main projects I'm doing now to using robots to understand animal behavior. The first question is, why do fish score? Well, this is a very big question. Biologists already have a lot of potential hypotheses. For example, individuals swim in a group can have higher chance to avoid predator, and hunting in groups can have higher efficiency, and swimming groups can sense the environment more precisely and also quickly. And another hypothesis is fish can save energy by swimming groups by extracting energy from the vortex shared by the neighbor. Energy saving in fish score is also, well, it's not a new topic. It came back to 1973, Daniel Weiss, and he first proposed that fish swim in diamond formation can save maximum energy. Well, he proposed this hypothesis purely based on mathematical modeling. After that, Tony Pitcher, who is a biologist, is interested in this hypothesis, and he decided to test this hypothesis with 4 different species. And he finds none of the species performed a diamond formation when they swim in groups. And then he said, well, fish probably do not need to consider energy saving when they swim in groups. Mark Abrahams, who is also a biologist, and he saw this debate, kind of debate between these 2 guys. And he reanalyzed this and think, well, if you really want to study energy saving in fish score, you probably need to get rid of a lot of other factors such as predator stress. If fish face a predator, fish will first react to the predator, which means avoiding the predator instead of saving energy, right? And if you put a social fish just to swim alone, then the fish will cost more energy because of stress. To study this, the best way probably is using a physical method. And following this, we built our physical platform. We have 2 robotic fish. They can swim freely in the float tank. And here, by saying freedom means they can swim at different spatial temporal formations. We can also visualize the flow with basically the hydrodynamic interactions between 2 robotic fish, and also measure energy cost of the robot when they swim at different spatial temporal formations. Again, well, you say you are using robotic fish to study this, then one question is whether it is effective to study this question or not. So we first visualize the vortex shaded by the robotic fish, and we see it's a nice reverse common vortex, which is the key thing for the real fish system to swim forward. After that, we mainly studied the phase difference and front-back distance between 2 fish, and we measure energy cost of each robot, mainly here follower, and we compare the energy cost of the follower when it swim in the group and swim in low, and then we get this efficient coefficient. When the positive value means energy saving when the followers swim in a group, and the negative value, here should be it's negative value. Negative value means energy cost. So you can see there's a linear correlation between phase difference and front back distance when the follower saves energy. So it's kind of the blue area here. Then we wonder what is the basic hydrodynamic interactions which makes the follower to save maximum energy like this, and to kind of governs the relationship between phase difference and front back distance. So we extract three typical cases where the follower is saving maximum energy by swimming in a group with a leader. So as you can see here, they have different spatial temporal formations, which means they have different front back distance d. They also have different relative undulation pattern, which is phase difference. But one thing is in common, that is, if you look at the flow shaded by the leader and the tail movements of the follower, you can see whenever the flow comes, the follower just follow the way the flow goes. In the simple way to understand it is like this: if the tail just flapping in the same direction of the induced flow of the vortex, then the follower saves energy. Otherwise, the follower costs more energy. It's a very simple principle. Like, you don't need to really have very detailed flow fields there, but it nicely explain the experimental data we get. So this dot is predicted by our rule based on this simple principle, and as you can see, they match quite well. This is just a glimpse of the model. It's quite simple. There's no details flow fields. The only thing is the kinematic parameters, such as the frequency, flow speed, and distance, and so on. And then you can predict what is the optimal phase or phase difference for the follower to perform to save maximum energy. Since the model is so simple and we don't need to collect very complex and also difficult to collect 3D or 2D flow fields around the fish body, so probably we can collect the real fish swimming kinematic parameters and then to test whether real fish also use the rule to save energy or not. Therefore, we run experiments with two real fish in the flow tank again, and we record the video from lateral and also bottom views. Then we can use deep learning to track the kinematics of each fish, and based on the tracked kinematics, we can extract what is lateral distance, what is phase, what is the phase difference, frequency, and amplitude, and so on. And based on that, we can predict what is the follower's optimal phase for the follower to perform to save maximum energy. And this is what we predict with the black dots here. So it's our theoretical predictions. And we can also measure, of course, measure the phase difference between two real fish as denoted by the gray dots here. So you can see they match quite well. Well, as a biologic studies, we can't just use one case to say, okay, fish use the rule to save energy because they, we find one case. This is not enough because, biologic system is always very noisy and they are affected by a lot of different factors, and some factors, you didn't control. So you might just, lucky you get that matching. Therefore, we systematically run these experiments. We collect a huge amount of data. Whenever the two real fish swim in the closer distance, we take those data out, and we can calculate what is the optimal phase difference based on our theoretical predictions, and what is the phase difference performed by the two real fish system. So you can see they match quite well. This indicates fish might, in general, using this rule, but still here there's still a chance, but also the chance is very low. Like I'm lucky or we are lucky We choose the specific fish and we did experiments in a specific day, and then fish perform this. And also fish perform this maybe not because of hydrodynamic interactions, probably they are perform this linear correlation between phase difference and the front back distance because of other factors. Therefore, we analyzed in another way. This is a randomized data. So we take 2 trials, and in each trial we just analyze the relationship between this fish in one trial and to another fish in another trial. So these 2 pair together, and in this case, they don't have any hydrodynamic interaction. They also don't have any visual connections. So just a completely, separate experiments or separate individuals, and then we can still analyze the relationship between phase difference and front back distance, and then we find the linear pattern disappeared. So this indicates that fish has to, these 2 guys have to interact each other to perform this phase difference and front back distance. Then the natural question is how do fish sense the flow information generated by the neighbor and then react to show this linear linear correlation and save the maximum energy. As we all know, fish have mainly 2 visual or 2 sensors. One is the vision, the other one is the lateral line. So vision is clear eye, and lateral line is an organ which can sense the flow nearby. So we did experiments with real fish, and we impaired the lateral line and also impaired the vision by running experiments in the dark environment. And we also impaired both, and we find the linear correlation is still there. So probably fish do not need do not need either vision or lateral line to perform this energy saving to adopt this energy saving mechanism. Then we hypothesized that fish might use proprioceptive sensing to feedback to adjust the body kinematics to save energy. What is proprioceptive sensing? A simple example you can understand as our human hand, and we don't have any lateral line, we don't have any flow sensor. But if we put our hand in the flow, we can feel how strong the flow is and which direction the flow comes. Similarly, the tail of the fish itself, it can sense the flow, how strong the flow nearby, and how which direction the flow comes. That means the tail itself is not only a propeller but also a sensor. So here it's very hard to test this hypothesis with real fish system, because if we impair the tail, then the fish cannot move, right? Cannot swim. Then you can't really test this. So here we, in order to test this hypothesis, we build a simulation platform and also experiment platform. So by collaborating with Professor Deng Jian from Zhejiang University, so we just purely consider very simple low dimensional force, like the resultant force suffering by the tail and the force in the X direction or Y direction, or just the purely simple friction force around the tail. And we find both of them or any of them is already effective for the robot or for the simulated robot to save maximum energy by sensing the flow with proprioceptive sensing and adjust the body kinematics to save energy. And similarly, we put this in the 2 robotic fish system, and we also find the follower can save energy just by simple proprioceptive sensing. All of those studies are conducted in 2D, and in nature, fish, they swim in 3D. So we wonder what is the effect of 3-dimensional formations related to the energy cost of the follower. So in this case, we control the height difference between 2 robotic fish and also control the phase difference. And in this case, we find a simple V shape between the height difference and the phase difference. And we also do flow visualizations, and we basically look at the the reverse carbon vortex shared by the robotic fish in different heights. And we find the higher, the smaller the vortex, and also the slower the vortex will move. And this indicates there's a shift between the optimal phase difference and front-back and height difference. All of those experiments we did we conducted in the flow tank, where we have a system which fixed the robotic fish. And how about free swim one? So here, unfortunately, we cannot really control two robotic fish swim purely, absolutely freedom, because we are not able to control two robotic fish swim with stable formations. So we connected the two robotic fish with a very thin bar, and we can control the phase difference and also measure energy cost at different phase difference. Or of course, we can also measure the swim speed. We find the power cost of each robot is related to the phase difference between the two robots. At some phase difference, the one robot can save maximum energy at a cost of your neighbor, at cost of the neighbor. So this is interesting. Like in nature, probably fish also has this chance. Like I'm selfish. I just want to save my energy. I don't care my neighbor. And what will I do? And then once your neighbor know, okay, you are selfish, then I also want to selfish. Then, well, this is kind of game theoretical problem, like how will nature will choose and update their strategy when they swim together facing these difficulties. After this problem, we're also trying to understand how do fish score with robotics. Well, this is also a very big question and also fundamental question in biologic systems. Traditional studies often rely on tracking individuals, and based on the tracking, they can estimate whether two individuals have interaction or not. For example, based on the geometric distance or topologic distance, visual connections or vernal distance, they can estimate, okay, these two guys, because within the distance, so they have interaction or information exchange. Well, this is actually, relatively strong assumption. For example, when you go to a shopping mall, you can accidentally just very close to a guy or a guy, and then you probably just have zero interaction with him or her. But similarly here, so fish has a chance, just physically positioned very close, but they don't have information exchange. This question is very similar as the philosophy question pointed by old Chinese saying, like, you're not a fish. How do you know what constitutes the enjoyment of fishes? It's a hard question. Like, how can we know whether who the focal individual is talking to and what kind of information the fish are exchanging? The easy way, well, is if you can talk to the real fish, then you can ask him, who is the guy is interacting to. But unfortunately, now we cannot talk to fish. So what is the solution then? One of the solutions is, what if we create artificial concept-specific, and we can control this concept-specific and interact with real fish. And then we can observe how the real fish reacts by those specific behaviors we control for the artificial concept-specifics. So one of the solutions is the robotic fish. Like you can put a robotic fish just swim with a real fish system, and then to see how the real fish react, and then you get some behavior. This is idealized, but unfortunately, the technology we have now, we cannot really create a robotic fish which can perform as, here perform means similar kinematics can have similar hydrodynamics. It's not possible. And the swim speed and the flexibility and so on, those are far behind the real fish system. Then what is the solution then? The solution is virtual robotic fish. Well, considering that most fish, they rely on vision. So why not, we just create a virtual robotic fish and then interact with those real fish and then study how the real fish interact. Then what is the technology behind it? It's a very simple technology, which is very close to us. So on the street, you probably see this 2D painting. Well, it's stereographic stuff, and you can see, well, it's 2D, but it gives you stereo effects, and you can see, wow, that is 3D. And the trick behind it is you need to look at this 2D image in the right angle. If you look at the 2D image in the wrong angle, then it will be distorted, and you find, okay, this is, just 2D things. How powerful this is. So here's a test for you. Like, here's a cubic, and I can tell you this is not 3D. This is fake. This is 2D. But your brain believes this is 3D at the beginning until this guy rotated and broke those stereo effect. But once the guy rotated to this to the right angle, your brain still believes that might be 3D, not 2D. And even you zoom in, you cannot tell whether this is just a 3D type or just a 2D things. And if you rotate it, you see, okay, this is fake. So based on this, we create a virtual reality system for fish. So we have a tracking system to track the real fish in the bowl. So here in the bowl, we have 4 cameras track the real fish in the 3D. And based on the position of the real fish, we project the 2D stereographic to make the real fish think she is swimming in a 3D environment. Then the natural question is whether it works or not, right? You need to give me some evidence to say whether this smart trick works for fish or not. And we first test with a virtual bar in the center, and we find the real fish spend most time just avoiding the central bar. And this indicates that the fish think there's a bar there, although there's physically no. Then, well, this is the environment scene, right? You are studying collective behavior and you want to study how fish interact with another fish. Then how about a virtual fish? So we project a virtual fish with doing circling behavior like the black circle here. Well, this is a very artificial behavior. You never see a real fish in life. It's keep doing circling, or very seldom if there's. And then you observe the real fish, which is denoted by the red dots here. And she's also doing circling behavior. And if you look at the relative position between the real fish and between the real fish here and the virtual fish, and you see most of the time the real fish is following the virtual fish. Well, then even we get these results, you probably still can argue, well, you project the real fish, the virtual fish, you don't know whether real fish think the virtual fish is a concept speaker or not. Well, this is a philosophical question. I don't think it is possible to answer now, but luckily we are, we are interested in collective behavior. So it's a behavior question. We don't care those philosophical questions. If the real fish behaviorally be fooled by the virtual fish, then the system should be enough for us to study behavior things. Then we compare the behavior of the real fish reacted to the real fish and to the virtual fish. How we do 2 real fish in the same arena, and then we analyze the turning speed and forward speed of the focal individual as a function of neighbor's position. So for example, the neighbor is here, and if there's, the focal individual is here, if there's a neighbor here, then the focal individual will turn right. If there's a neighbor here, then the focal individual will turn left. And this is the speed control. If so the focal individual is here, and if there's a neighbor here, then the focal individual will have a higher forward speed. Otherwise, the follower will have a lower forward speed. And This is just a real fish interacts with another real fish. And for the virtual fish case, we have two identical virtual reality systems. In one system, we have one real fish and one virtual fish. And the other one is also a real fish and a virtual fish. And in this case, we control the virtual fish completely by a real fish in another system. So it's kind of, this one is, this guy's avatar. So like the real fish is, drive the avatar in another parallel world. And they're kind of two real fish interacting each other in two worlds, and they, interact each other. This is kind of create a meta system for real fish, and they are interacting. In this case, we can, these two real fish are actually interacting each other by just connected by the virtual fish system here. So we can still do the analyze as like turning speed and forward speed as a function of neighbor's position, but now the neighbor is virtual fish, which is controlled by a real fish. And you can see they are very similar. And so this indicates that fish behaviorally reacts to the virtual fish in a way very similar to the real fish. So we can study behavior question, but still, well, we can't answer the philosophy question, of course. So we take this to study some individual decision-making problem. This also starts from a philosophy question that is Bourdain's S paradox. So it says there's a donkey and she's very hungry, and she accidentally just stands in between two bundles of hay. The two bundles of hay gives the exactly same reward to the donkey. So the donkey has no reason, no bias or no signal to choose which one to eat first or to eat. Then the donkey spends a lot of time to think about it. And the more time she thinks, the more hungry she will be. And finally, she might die there. So this philosophy thing is actually very popular in our engineering systems. For example, a self-driving car, the car wants to avoid the object in front. The car can do either turn left or turn right. But if you, based on reward function, it probably will give you exactly reward value for turning left or turn right. Then the self-driving car needs to make decision quickly. And the more the system takes to solve this, the higher risk the car will collide with the object in front. So we can also transform the similar question to the fish system here. We can give two identical leaders and ask how the real fish choose to follow. And we also get a very simple Ising model, which can model how the individual will make decision in such cases. And we find this model have a very interesting property. So whenever the individual has to make a decision at some distance point, the susceptibility of this individual at this point increase very exponentially increased. And this indicates that if there's a very tiny noise around this point, then the individual will make decision immediately. So here gives two targets, identical targets. And here also, if the individual facing three identical targets, there are multiple bifurcation points, like the point you needed to make decision quickly. And once the individual very close to the point, the susceptibility exponentially increased. And then this helps individual make decision quickly and then move to the next decision point. And this increase the efficiency of decision making. And this property is emerged and is not designed in the system. So we can also test this with two real fish system and also three virtual fish system, and to see how the real fish make decisions. And we see they have similar things as we predicted. So what are we doing here in the future? And we are a group focused on using robots to study collective behavior at different level of the Reynolds number. With low Reynolds number, the hydrodynamics often is is lower important, is less important than the vision. So we mainly use the virtual reality system. At moderate Reynolds number level, we can also use a computational fluid dynamics system to simulate the fluids and also use other visual reconstruction method or algorithm to reconstruct the vision system to understand what the sensory, what potential sensory information the fish can get and make individual movement decision. When the Reynolds number is very high, then with CFD is very expensive and you can't solve it very quickly, efficiently. Then we can build a robotic fish and we can put them in the flow tank to get the flow fields we want and also collect some power cost information and also efficiency information, which is very hard to get by other systems. So one of the projects we are doing now is using Unity to reconstruct the visual field of the follower. So here it shows top view, there's leader and there's follower. The follower is following leader. And what the follower is seeing when they perform in the, this spatial temporal formation is showing or reconstructed here. And based on this, we can understand why the follower changes speed like those, and what is the sensory motor for the follower to perform this behavior. Another way is we are trying to reconstruct the 4D shapes of fish swimming in the flow tank or in groups, and we can 3D scan the fish after we run experiments, and based on this, we can reconstruct the 3D shapes moving over time, so it's 4D. Also, we can, after we get these 3D shapes, we can drive the robot to swim and repeat the movements of the two real fish, and then we can collect particle image. We can collect the fluid fields based on particle image velocimetry, and we can also control the robot in real time to interact with the real fish after we find some interaction rule. And in this case, the robotic fish can be controlled by the microcontroller, and which is driven by the outputs or the image-based detection of the real fish system. After we get those sensory motor control of the robots, of the real fish system, we can also deploy it to the purely engineering systems at Constance here. We also have an amazing large arena. We call imaging hangar here as 12 meters times 12 meters times 8 meters. And we have very precise motion capture system, and we are trying to deploy large amount of robots to perform swarm behavior and to study purely based on robots. And here we show two drones flying together with leader follower perform, and two territorial robots. They perform a leader follower performance, leader follower behavior. Finally, I would like to acknowledge all of my collaborators and also funding support. And also I would like to acknowledge you guys for your time. And if you have any question, I'm happy to take. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Li. This was very impressive talk and very informative, I would say. So yeah, let's open time question. Any question from the audience? The chat, maybe? Yeah, you can just turn on your microphone and directly ask questions, or again, write down in the chat. No questions at the moment. I'll start with one, just to open with questions. I was wondering, actually, at the very beginning, you just shown some CFD simulations and then compared with, say, the experiments where the fish has to reach a target, I was just wondering, in the CFD simulation, what kind of boundary conditions, the domain you perform? Because it seems that there was like some differences in the CFD and the experiment. I was just wondering if like boundary conditions can make a difference.
This is a good question. I didn't really do systematically explore whether basically the mesh methods, like how detailed we should design the mesh. But we do test the mesh with our system. I don't know whether that is effective or not. But
my question is related to the fact that in reality you have this solid boundary condition.
Yes.
So due to flapping, you have these waves returning back and somehow disturbing the background flow. While usually in CFD, maybe you have periodic boundary conditions, so which kind of emulate a very much larger, say, domain, because you don't have this reflection. So just was wondering if that was considered.
Yes, I think this is possible. Another possibility is that our robotic fish, there's one guy who is asking what's the size of the robot. So the size of robot is 45 centimeters, quite large. I mean, if we do CFD there, the Reynolds number is reaching order 10 to 5, it's very high. So at that level, I think it's very challenging to really get precise simulation. So that platform, we applied as a platform to tune parameters. So it's not really a platform to study hydrodynamic of robotic fish system. So it's just to help us to save time, save money to tune parameters with the robot. Because if you tune parameters directly on the robot, you might, somehow break the robot. So with that platform, we are trying, to get a very simple algorithm and get efficient, parameter tuning, and then after that we can deploy to the robotic fish system. But but still, yes. The boundary stuff is very critical for this thing. But it's not our focus.
Okay, no problem. You already answered, I think, the question from the chat. Is there any other question?
Hi, Dr. Li.
Yes.
I want to ask a simple question. Why the swimming of two robotic fish you called schooling?
Okay, so schooling fish does not mean a school of fish. Schooling fish means a fish can school. You get my point? So if you say, okay, a fish school, you can't say two fish, a school fish. Oh, sorry, a fish school. But if both of them are schooling fish, they can school. You get my point?
Okay. Thank you. I get it.
Yeah, so it's like, you can, for example, like I'm a Chinese people. I'm Chinese. You can call me Chinese people, but you can't call me like a group of Chinese people or something like those. So they can perform a schooling behavior, and then this fish can be called as schooling fish. But you can't say two fish is a school. I hope this is clear for you.
Yeah. I get it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. What is the virtual fish like? What is the virtual fish like? Is there any hydrodynamics exist? Why do they have relative low Reynolds number? I should read your paper first. Thank you. Okay. So the virtual fish, as I mentioned, we are running experiments with very low Reynolds number. So in that case, the fish is very small. We're using zebrafish. Maximum size is around 1 centimeter. At this size, the hydrodynamics is, well, there is, of course, there is hydrodynamics for the physical life system, but with our virtual system, of course, there's no any, hydrodynamics around. Therefore, we don't have any physical or fluid stimulus in the virtual reality system, but it works. And also we blocked the lateral line of the fish, and we find the behavior performed regularly as those fish swim with lateral line. And the other thing is like we choose this size of fish because they are still not adult, so their organ, the lateral line sensor, is not fully constructed. So all of those reasons indicates that for our specific species, like we use zebrafish, and it's already enough to use this system to study those species behavior. And of course, if you have some other species which is heavily rely on lateral line, of course you cannot use the system. And also you cannot use the system for probably large Reynolds number, like large fish. You can't do that because large fish, they have higher sensitive to hydrodynamics. And that's why we have a flow tank and robotic fish here. Yeah, I hope this answers your question. What is the? Okay, yeah. Why do they have relatively low Reynolds number? Because they are small and swim relatively slow. The other question is, how can CFD simulation results assist to compare the results of experiments? Are you focusing on the behavior robot fish in simulation or some physical pairs? So first part, I'm not sure you're talking about the CFD with experiments with robotic fish or with real fish. So CFD with robotic fish is basically tuning parameters for the robotic fish. And the CFD with real fish system, we are trying to extract the detailed hydrodynamics around real fish system. And then we can understand why real fish perform like this, like because they suffering the like flow field around the fish body or pressure or whatever. So that means we are kind of extracting the details of hydrodynamic sensing with CFD. Are you focusing on the behavior robotic fish in simulation or in some physical pairs? We're not focusing on the behavior robotic fish because the behavior robotic fish, you can completely control it. You can control the robot to do almost everything. Cool, thanks. Any other question?
It seems nobody has any other question. Oh yeah, we have.
Okay. Yeah, that's one. Like ask that. Like to ask that. Had you tried to build up a precise dynamic and kinematic model of the flexible tail? This is a very interesting question. Yeah. The stiffness of this is really interesting, and we're trying to do something like those, like with soft robot, which we can control the stiffness of the body, and then can study how the stiffness will contribute to the schooling behavior. We're not yet. Yeah, basically stiffness. Yeah, or case difficult. Yeah, thanks.
Good. Seems that
cool.
There are no more questions. So I'd like to thank again Dr. Liang Li for
cool. Thank you.
Talk. Yeah. And I would like to invite you everyone to our next talk next week. So have a good rest of your day.
And you too. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.